He stood up to fight for the inclusion of Black art. Now, more than 50 years later, a step forward in a powerful new exhibit at the Museum of Fine Arts. Artist and educator Dahna Chandler discusses his career, experience in the museum as a child, and what and how much has changed since his fight began in the 70s. That's coming up next on The PowerPLAY Show.
From the studios at Hull Bay Productions, this is Season 3 of The PowerPLAY Show. Now, here's Tonya McGrath.
Welcome to The PowerPLAY Show. I'm your host, Tonya McGrath. As we celebrate Black excellence this month, I'm proud to introduce my guest today, who's been fighting for racial equality his entire life. Professor Dahna Chandler is an African-American painter, printmaker, and educator from Boston, Massachusetts. Growing up in Roxbury, Chandler attended Saturday morning art classes at the Museum of Fine Arts and later at Boston Technical High School, where he was awarded the National Scholastic Art Award for all 4 years of his high school career, as well as the school's first annual art award in 1959. He graduated from Massachusetts College of Art during a time when the civil rights movement was permeating throughout the country. He taught at Simmons College for over 30 years and created and directed the African American Master Artist in Residence program at Northeastern University. Last spring, the Museum of Fine Arts staff recovered a document long overlooked in the museum's archives, a proposal to eradicate institutional racism at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, written by Dahna Chandler in 1970. The manifesto challenges the MFA and other institutions to represent Black artists in their collections, exhibitions, and financially support Black self-determination in the arts. Chandler's challenge pushed the Museum of Fine Arts to host Afro-American artists, New York and Boston, in the spring of 1970. But since then, not much has changed at the Museum of Fine Arts over a 50-year span. In 2020, local renowned artist Rob Stull, my dear friend, became the first local artist and artist of color whose work donned the entrance to the MFA. And last fall, Chandler's work became featured in a new exhibit at the MFA, New Light, Encounters and Connections, a homecoming, if you will, from the fight of a young artist decades before, fighting for the acknowledgement and work of young Black artists in Boston. I am so proud to introduce Dahna Chandler and his daughter, Dahna Chandler. Welcome you both to the PowerPLAY Show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I
appreciate being here.
I appreciate you wanting to do this, Mr. Chandler. It is such a wonderful treat of mine to be able to speak with you today. Mr. Chandler, I did so much research on you, but what stood out for me the most was how you never stopped fighting for the acknowledgement of African American artists. Does this continue to be an important issue for you?
Yes, it probably will be so until the day I pass on. And it's also very important for me to talk about and to be a part of the growth of African American women into this society, to the place where they have always supposed to have been. So it's a pleasure being interviewed by a woman and to have my daughter here. You know, because you two we both know that you're both smarter than me, and I like that.
Mr. Chandler, when you think about the struggle that Black artists have had over the decades, particularly since you were a young adult, what sticks out most for you as some of the biggest challenges that artists have had?
Well, for us as a people, one of the biggest challenges we have had is that we don't buy our own art. We don't even pay much attention to our own art. It's really awful. It just drives me crazy. And the other thing is we don't think that artists need to eat. So in the not buying of the work, they keep us from being able to support our families in the same way that they're used to. That's beginning to change, but the terrible thing still is, it's more because white folks are allowing it to happen than it is because there's a real drive among us to do it. And I've always hated the fact that we always wait until white folks tell us we can do a thing before we do a thing. Yeah, I know that both of you remember how we wouldn't read Time magazine because we were told that wasn't for us. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands that everything is for us because we began in it, everything anyway. And we need to be very clear about that.
Dahna, when you think about the work that your dad has done in helping to get all these artists just recognized in museums across the country, across the world, if you will, what sense of pride does that give to you, knowing that he has just worked his whole life to kind of make this happen?
I'm enormously proud of my dad and all he's done in terms of helping other artists get exposed and get recognition that they needed, as well as the resources they needed to just work, to do their work, to gain respect, to gain access to the opportunities they deserved because of the phenomenal work that they were doing. But also as someone who was committed to the young artists in his charge, whether they were from schools in the area or at his own institution, Simmons, as a professor. He was determined that young women would get what they needed in terms of education, as well as opportunities to be the artists that they were meant to be. And many, many people can thank my father for the place they're in because of what he did with AMARP and with artists in general.
You know, Mr. Chandler, you went and taught at Simmons for over 30 years. And for anyone in the audience that doesn't know, Simmons is one of the elite colleges for women in the country. Why was that important to you to work at Simmons?
Well, the person who taught me most of my life was my mother. And my mother never got a chance to get a full education and still ended up being smarter than most of the people I've known in the world. And I wanted that same thing for as many other women as I could be a part of their lives. And Simmons provided me with that opportunity. And I love teaching at Simmons because, for me at least, the African-American women there were smarter than any women I had ever known. And continue to be, I'm sure. And besides which, I have this daughter who's sitting on the show who has spent her entire life being with me. I don't understand why she wanted to do that, but she did. And she was very good at it. And she was very good for me. She takes care of me now, takes care of all of my needs. And I wouldn't want anybody else to touch anything that is about me but her. This here is a good woman. A good woman. So that was my reason.
And I'm sure that she just loves what you just said about her. Mr. Chandler, I want to take a step back and talk about, because you lived literally across the street from the Museum of Fine Arts. Describe what it was like visiting the MFA as a young person.
For me, it was hilarious a lot of times, because as soon as I showed my brown face in the museum, the guards, who at that time were mostly white, would follow me around to make sure I didn't touch anything. And I would confront them often and ask them, what's your problem? You know, I just want to make sure you don't touch anything. I said, what you're saying to me is that I'm stupid? I'm actually going to go up and touch art in this place? I said, it's not going to happen. I said, you can follow me if you want to. I'll enjoy your company. And that's where I was coming from in terms of all that stuff. I loved being in the Museum of Fine Arts. The Museum of Fine Arts tells the population around it that this is their museum, and I decided I would believe that. So I went everywhere in the museum. I enjoyed looking at the Japanese katanas and also all of the various clothing from different cultures. I loved the furniture, and I loved the paintings, and I was very happy to be there. After a while, they got to know me, and they didn't bother me much.
But I read in my research that you actually told one of the security guards something when you were young. You said, my work is going to be in this museum one day.
I certainly did. I told him my work was going to be in the museum, that I would be one of the most famous artists that he had ever known. He would forget me, but I wouldn't forget him. And I would talk about him when I got that opportunity, when I grew up, and I kept my word.
Yes, yes, you did. You know, it's thinking back to those early days in the 60s, 70s, and, you know, going to the museum and seeing everything in there that really wasn't representative of our culture, of the African American experience. Did that actually stand out to you at such an early age? Did you know that there was something wrong at that time?
I did, very much so. I didn't see me in it, and I could understand that because I saw myself as being a highly intelligent individual, and I knew I wasn't the only person that was that smart. As I said earlier, you know, I had my mother and I had my sisters, you know, and my brothers, and we were a very, very well educated group of African American community. And I just kept asking myself, where are we? Where are we? Why aren't we here? You know, as I got older, I began to understand that they were using our tax dollars to keep their thing going. I really got pissed. And I let everybody around me know it. And sometimes they would do exhibitions about other African nations, like what they call Egypt, which is really Kemet. And I would just say to them, what is this all about? And they always presented it wrong. And they didn't like being corrected by somebody who looked like me. Which didn't bother me in the slightest. I just kept correcting them. They would present exhibitions where the whole show was presented upside down and didn't even know it, didn't even have the information, and decided not to use it. It's just amazing to me. So that was my museum. It was my home away from home. I wanted more and more Black people to go there. I want more and more Black people to go there now. This is your museum. Go and see what they're doing. And if they're not doing what we're supposed to have done right, make them change it. They are trying to control your narrative. It's your narrative, not theirs. So it really bothers me because it's very clear when someone controls your narrative, they control you. So folks in Boston, please continue to get together. Hey, choir, if you're out there, hello. I'm so glad your work was there. Go ahead.
Dahna, did your dad take you to the MFA as a child? And what do you remember about whatever he taught you about that museum?
Yes, I was at the MFA frequently. I didn't love it as much as he did. I was not thrilled. I was not thrilled by the fact that there weren't enough of us there. I didn't like the white folks following us around. And, I was, even at that age, I was fairly activist, and I let them know I didn't like being followed. I wasn't going to touch anything. I certainly wasn't going to steal anything. And it was a very uncomfortable experience for me. Especially, that was the era of Perry Rathbone. And I thought of Perry Rathbone as, remember the book Hansel and Gretel? Mm-hmm. I swore that man put little kids in the oven and ate them for lunch. I mean, he freaked me out. And so did most of the people. The day that I became most proud was when my dad's art show opened and he was there, and all these Black faces were in the museum to see the show, and all of these white folks were in awe of what they were seeing, as if we, suddenly we were the most brilliant people on earth, because they discovered us. They discovered that we were the most brilliant people on earth, and they were proud of themselves. And that's not true of all of them. There were a lot of white folks who fought with my father to get that show hung. And we've always had allies and accomplices. But then there were the other folks. So for me, the museum wasn't as fun a place. But then I wasn't an artist. Even then, I was at that age, I was interested in finance. So I really wasn't as impressed with. And I wondered why all of this stuff from Egypt and other parts of the world was there. How did they get this stuff? And it became clearer as I got older that they had stolen most of it. And so that was bothersome to me. So I had a different perspective. But I was glad that my dad did what he did to get Black artists in that museum. And he worked with so many other people to help do that.
Mr. Chandler, who were some of your early artists that you were inspired by, that you looked up to in the beginning of your career?
In Boston, it was John Wilson and Calvin Burnett. Around the world, it was, and you'll have to excuse me now, when my mind doesn't work like it used to, I can't just snap things off. Elizabeth Catlett Moore, I was really proud to know her. And I was even prouder when she came to Boston. And one of the things that she did back in the 70s was come to see me to see whether, and this is a quote from her. "Hey, you're Dahna." I said, "Yeah, I am. I came all the way to Boston to see you, young man, and I want to see if you're real." I said, "Oh boy, this is gonna be fun," and it was. In Boston, we have a young lady who is not a professional artist, but is very, very much involved in the arts and does a lot of her own work too, as well, named Barbara Ward. And then there's also Barbara Ward, who made all the black dolls and sculpture and things. Mm-hmm. She was part of AMOP and a bunch of other people. And as we think of them, well, name them off. Bakewell, of course. I was so tickled when I found out she was having her own show. I had to dance across my room twice, and I can't dance no more. So I'm really thrilled about that. Yeah.
All right, we need to take a quick break. More with Professor Dahna Chandler and his daughter, Dahna Chandler. When we continue, you're listening to the PowerPLAY Show. Hi, I'm Tonya McGrath, producer and director of the upcoming film project, More Than Our Skin. I decided to make this film because I saw a need to let the stories of those living with vitiligo be heard. That it's more than the spots you see. It's the feelings, the depression, the community, and the lives of those impacted by an autoimmune disease with no known cure. More Than Our Skin plans to tell the stories of a diverse cast of people who are willing to share their journeys, many for the first time, as they make positive steps to bring understanding, inclusivity, and acceptance to this widely misunderstood disease. It is my hope that this film will change lives, not just for those with vitiligo, but for the wider audience who will understand once and for all that it's more than our skin. Thank you.
Now, back to the PowerPLAY Show.
Mr. Chandler, I want to talk about your proposal from 1970 to eradicate institutional racism at the Museum of Fine Arts. Tell me about how you came about creating this proposal and what it entailed in terms of you submitting it to the MFA.
I was walking through the Museum of Fine Arts one day, as I often do, and I went looking for somebody to tell me where the black art was and why wasn't it there. And I ran into a curator whose name I don't remember, so that's a big deal. And I said, "Where's all the black art?" I said, "You're right across the street from the black community. Where's the art?" He said, "Well, when your people get to the point where they're doing art, which is worthy of being in this museum, it'll be here." I don't want to tell you what I said to him after he said that, but there were a few words that I used. And I told him, not only will there be black art in this museum, dear fellow, there will also be me. And he laughed. I said, "That's the worst mistake you ever made. You'll find that out in time." And that's what impelled me to write this document. Here was a place that was full of African art. Not African American, but I mean actual art from Africa, which they had stolen. And then I found out a little later they had 24,000 pieces of African art in the museum basement in storage. They have far more art in storage than they place on those walls. I mean, they could equip at least 1,000 museums fully with the stuff they have in storage that is part of the African continent and the other continents of color. You know, because that's what these people do, these neo-colonialists. They rob our stuff, they transform our stuff, and then they say they did it. And if you know anything about Nigeria and the Ife and Benin cultures, you know that they kept for a long time this story going about how the Greeks came down from Greece into Africa and created the Benin art and the Ife art. I mean, the audacity of these people is just striking, and it's unceasing. It's every day, 24 hours a day. These neo-colonialist people just keep badgering and pushing and shoving us and our stuff, killing us. I'm sure you know, you heard of the recent killing that they've done of this young black man who was minding his own business when they busted in and shot him dead. But that's what they do. And, you know, I don't think that we should be afraid of that anymore. And I don't think we need to be quiet about it. I love what black women are doing now. I mean, up in arms is where we should be historically, because as long as we allow them, they will continue to do this. So that was what that was all about. I just think, even thinking about it now, it makes me angry. You know, they still have not done right by us. But there are allies that we have in that museum, like a young woman named Liz, who are helping immensely to make changes. And I am so proud of her and the other people that I call the descendants of the people who ran the Underground Railroad. That's what I call our allies. So it's easier for me to deal with them now than it was many years ago, where I was just walking around being angry all the time.
So you submit this proposal. Do you remember what the initial reaction was? How did they respond to your proposal?
It's really interesting. They were pissed. They were highly pissed, because at that time I was running the program that I was running at Northeastern University, and I had a lot of friends in the press. And I'm the kind of person, when I want you to do something, I go find you and present you with the stuff that I want you to do, and we have a discussion. And I'm so logical in my arguments, it's hard for people to refute what I'm saying. That has never changed. I don't think it ever will change. You know, for whatever arguments you got that say you shouldn't do a thing, I always have an argument that says that you should, especially since you've told me all your life that you are, you know, the colonialist to the world, and you can do anything. That means you can do anything I tell you to do. So get about the business of doing what I told you to do. My attitude has always been like that because I'm fearless.
And you mentioned a little bit that you had support in the community. Was it primarily coming from the African-American community, or were you also getting some support from the white counterparts?
Yeah, I was getting support from everywhere. You know, we have a tremendous number of allies. We often don't recognize them, but we have to remember that during the time of the Underground Railroad, they lived and died with us. You know, it was a high price they paid, and they paid it very willingly. And so we must use work with our allies to make change in this country, because that's why we're here on the earth. And since God has always made that very clear, we have to be about the business, as Jesus said, of his Father's work. And that's what and where I always want to be. I want to be about the business of the Lord's work. And where I try to work very, very hard to do that. Because I don't want to get to heaven and have God say, get out. I'm not looking for anything like that. Besides which, I have my daughter, and she keeps me on my toes, don't you, sweetie?
So
you can say it. Go ahead.
Yes, I do.
There you go.
So
Okay.
from this proposal, the MFA eventually premiered the exhibit Afro-American Artists, New York and Boston. How significant was this exhibit that I think it was spring of 1970?
It was so significant that they kept it going for a while after the time that it was supposed to go. It was so significant because, as my daughter said, they really were absolutely stunned by the work. They couldn't believe that African American artists were doing work at that caliber. And so they just had to keep, and they did a very good job of publicizing the show, and they kept doing a good job because we brought crowds in daily. And all the way from the time it started until it ended, we brought crowds in. And of course, the Boston Brahmins and Perry T. Rathbone took credit for it. But the work of presenting that show was largely done by a man by the name of Barry Gaither, who is still part of the museum. And Barry, who is one of the smartest human beings I have ever known, do not ask him a question and expect to get a two-word answer. He's very much like me. If you ask me a question, you're going to get a novel. And Barry knows a lot about a whole bunch of things, and I'll always consider him to be one of my best friends because he has fought for Black people his entire life. His wife, Sandra Fury, has fought for Black people their entire life. So I'm very proud of a whole bunch of Black people in Boston. People that I've known since childhood, like Ruth Batts and Elma Lewis and what was her name? Mama Cass. Mama Cass. Oh, man.
Yeah.
And of course, Miss Jackson, who ran Exodus and all those. Those were my supporters, you know. And you know that saying about if God is for you, you know, you don't have to worry about nobody else, folks. Those people looked after me all the time I was growing up as a young man. So I have a very strong Black background in Boston, and I'm very grateful for it.
Can you describe some of the art that you contributed to this particular exhibit in 1970? I know that you're a phenomenal artist, but you've also been very, very socially active, civically active in the fight for civil rights, for the advancement of people of color. So talk about some of the work that was a part of that exhibit.
The site is celebratedactivistartist.com, and it's really about the life, work, and the legacy of my father. And I created it specifically for that. There's some information about the MFA 1970 exhibition, but not a whole lot. What I can tell you is that the MFA, I think you have seen that webpage. The MFA put a webpage together that talks a lot about what was in that show. So, and that includes what pieces of my dad that are seminal. So the original Fred Hampton's Door, which was a painting, was in that show. And there was another piece called Free Huey that was in that show. And when you go to their web page, you see an image of my dad talking, doing a gallery talk before the Free Louis painting. And you see this little girl's head. That's my little head. So what my dad said about me being with him and for him my whole life is reflected in everything that he's done. And that includes that. But those are two of the pieces that were in the show.
Mr. Chandler, we see that the work that you were able to do and what change you were able to impact in 1970, and it feels as though, you know, that there was that great opportunity right there to kind of continue the work of promoting artists of color from all over the globe. But it didn't seem to sustain as much over the past several decades. And what do you make of that?
Well, sorry, folks, but I'm as blunt as I always am. We keep expecting white people to tell us what to do, and we keep following what they tell us to do. And I think that's one of the stupidest things we do. And we need to stop it. We need to start prizing our own stuff, because our stuff generally is better than any stuff that's produced out there anyway. And we're the best at everything that we do. I mean, we prove it every day. All you folks out there have to do is go on any social service, and you will find phenomenal Black people doing phenomenal things 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We've got to push for and have around us our own stuff. And that, of course, is very true for the visual arts. Why aren't you buying your own art? Why do your children have to see stuff from big box stores hanging on the walls as replication of stuff that has nothing to do with you? So that's what I think has to happen. Every time we do something phenomenal, it has a moment in the sun on all of the venues that white folks have created for themselves. So they'll have time to take it, change it, use it, make a whole lot of money from, and leave us standing in the dust. They've done that to all the music we've ever created. If you want to go see blues singers, most of them are white now. They sound like us, but they don't look like us, and they can't sing like us. I'm really pissed off about that, because you can't take our music and make it sound like we sound. I mean, Mariah Carey and a whole bunch of other young people proved that. But we had our own people who were doing all kinds of singing. Nobody put out Sing Sarah Vaughan. Everybody tried, and everybody failed. And we have a list so long about that in terms of the people who could sing and dance. You always come to us to create your next thing. Stop it. Get out of our way and let us do our own thing. Also, I have a beef, and here it comes. I have noticed that corporate America has decided they're going to help to brown America because they see money. So if you look at the commercials, there are all these gorgeous Black people with these average-looking white folks. Do they really think we're that stupid? We like beautiful people too, and also we do not integrate as well as they would have us believe. But I am so disturbed about these crappy commercials and all these funny-looking white people who are hooked up to these devastatingly handsome and beautiful but brilliant people whose material they are stealing while you're watching the commercial. Come on, Black people, you're smarter than that, And don't expect me to be polite about it, because I'm not going to.
No apologies needed. We're going to take another quick break, more with the Chandlers. When we continue, you're listening to the PowerPLAY Show.
Did he have vitiligo, and is that why he lightened his skin?
The king of pop had vitiligo.
I'm a Black American. I'm proud to be a Black American.
And he allegedly bleached his skin.
I have a skin disorder. There is no such thing as skin bleaching.
Let's get to the fact versus the fiction here.
He has a serious skin condition, which I have witnessed.
When people make up stories that I don't want to be who I am, it hurts me.
My world ended that day.
Because what was your biggest fear?
I'm just too fabulous for that. All of this chocolate, milk chocolate, you're saying may go away?
That's all I did was watch TV, go to the refrigerator, watch TV, go to the refrigerator. That's it. That's all I did. I wasn't doing nothing. I was staying in the house.
Next to photos, it's like, and then be the spotted one. So it was hard, absolutely.
This was gonna be it. That there was not going to be anything else out there to help me because I had already tried everything.
Why me? Especially in mornings when you had to do life again. each day. I was like, why me?
Vitiligo is an autoimmune disease.
The immune system, which we know fights viruses, and vitiligo, it's the skin color cells.
Leading to white patches, often in exposed areas such as the face or hands. When patients come in, sometimes they just want to know what's going on.
Is this something that I can catch?
And once we know what causes vitiligo and what drives vitiligo, we can design treatments and be able to treat patients.
The creators of 100 Years, 100 Voices of Faith bring you more than our skin. The compelling stories of 5 women living with vitiligo. It's the story of more than the skin you see. It's the pain, depression, suicide thoughts that come knowing that with their pigmentation, a bit of humanity also faded away.
I was upset. They used to stare and look and point.
How is the disease affecting them?
I didn't want to be around people.
Not leaving their homes because it so deeply affects them.
The view of all the people and them.
There's no way you can hear those stories and not get personally involved.
Oh, were you burned in a fire? And I looked at him and I said, does this look like a burn?
And through their anger and pain, they're able to stand strong with the support of their communities to tell the world what they want you to know about what it means to live with vitiligo.
The journey will be hard.
They should not, make fun of people.
It's not just spots on your skin. This is affecting this.
We got to speak for those that don't want to speak, for the voiceless.
My biggest hope is that it encourage, lift up, pick up someone that's down in the dumps. Our aim is to continue on this upward motion, making it happen.
More than our skin.
Now, back to the PowerPLAY show.
The Museum of Fine Arts acquired your piece, Fred Hampton's Door 2, now part of the New Light Encounters and Connections exhibit through August 2022. What does this exhibit mean for you?
When my family knew through Dahna that work had, Fred Hampton's Door had been purchased by the museum, I love my son Dana's response. He jumped up in the air and he started screaming, finally, finally, finally. And because he was so excited, because I always felt that this museum should have been buying my work since they were right across the street, since their museum association had come to AMOP and got themselves drunk on all the liquor that the university provided for them, had partied all through the place, since the museum had done various kinds of programs at AMOP, bringing in kids from all over the city. But they should have been purchasing my work for a long time, and the works of a whole lot of people. Mm-hmm. There were 13 artists of huge professional circumstance at AMOP, still are, and yet this Museum of Fine Arts, right across the street from the Black community, listed itself as being in Roxbury, would not buy the work. And I was always furious at them about that. I was always telling them about it. You need to buy the work of the people who you are exploiting. They never liked what I said to them. I didn't care. They were exploiting us then, they're exploiting us now. But the country, the part of the whole oeuvre, I guess, of Euro-colonialists is to exploit everything and everybody everywhere, and they especially have exploited the women of our nation. And it's been extremely bothersome to me about that. And actually, I would like to, I know, Dahna, I'm not supposed to do this, but I would like you to make a comment on that, because you put things in words that are just, do it, baby.
Well, it enrages me, obviously. It's part of my doctoral dissertation. In fact, my doctoral dissertation focuses on misogyny against, or misogynoir against senior executives in the finance industry. And so I talk a lot about the through line from enslavement to today and the constant brutality against Black women in particular, which Tonya, are the least protected, least respected women on the planet.
Yeah.
And we're the mules of the planet and have been in America since there was an America.
Yep.
So yeah, it enrages me. And that's why I appreciate the t-shirts you have on, because that speaks some truth about us. We are outstanding. We're just fabulous. And to treat us as if, and we rescue this country all the time.
Right.
We bear the burden of whatever happens in this country, and look to constantly to turn things around, and then we're tossed aside like trash. And so, yeah, it enrages me. I could go on and on and on, but I won't. I think you get the point. I want it to change. It's long past time for it to change, particularly given what we do for this country, what we do add to this country. And my dad keeps saying Ekwa's work was in the museum. It's been featured largely all over Boston, but she needs to get national recognition for the work she does. It's outstanding. There's no reason that she shouldn't. And we are relegated to whatever the patriarchy, the white supremacist patriarchy, decides we're going to be. And so my dad's latest work addresses that. It addresses that through line, that exploitation from enslavement to today.
Dahna, what does this exhibit now that is portraying all these different artists mean for you, just and your dad being a part of this exhibit?
It means that he's getting the recognition that he finally deserves, and so are those artists. That Black art is getting the recognition it finally deserves. That it shows the brilliance of the artists that are in the exhibition and the outstanding nature of their work. It, to me, supersedes most artists of any background out there. And it's about time the people who built the foundation of the wealth of this country, who built most of the institutions physically and intellectually in this country, get the recognition. Their artists get the recognition they deserve. And I am greatly appreciative of people like Liz Munzel at the museum, who battles constantly for the museum to change. Now, what is happening is there are a lot of people who are being moved out, and people who are at very least progressives, which I can have issues with because they can be racist too and not really understand how they are. But many of them activists, allies and accomplices who want to see the museum be what it's supposed to be. A museum is supposed to represent the community it's in. And it's taken 51 years from the time my dad's first Fred Hampton store was in that show till it was purchased, the Fred Hampton store 2, which was the replacement for the stolen piece, got acquired by the museum. And so we're immensely proud to have his piece come home, since it was really created about 4 blocks from the museum.
Yeah.
And it was there the whole time. And the museum essentially ignored us. I can remember going by the museum and not feeling like it was really part of the community. It was a separate island in and of itself. This changes that to a degree. And I want to see more of it. And I also want to see the museum be more welcoming to us. We had an event a couple of years ago where Black children were essentially brutalized when they went to that museum.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the reason why. And I remember saying to people, that's my experience with the museum. And the only thing that was different was when people realized whose daughter I was, the attitudes and behavior changed. Wow. And that angered me. Mm-hmm. Because why? Why not treat us all right? Just because we deserve to be. So there's been some movement, And this represents that. But even Liz would say that there's still change to be done. And I agree with her.
I mentioned at the top of the show that my dear friend, Rob Stahl, became the first Black local artist whose work donned the facade of the MFA with an exhibit that ended early last year. And this was really a first time where, for me, I saw, because, you know, I'm an 80s baby in high school age and grew up with rap and hip hop and that whole culture. And the first time I saw things from my childhood that made sense on the front of the Museum of Fine Arts. And I remember going there in person and I cried because I never thought that something like that could happen. And I'm wondering if you read about this, if you knew about this, and how you reacted to it.
Well, the Stahl family and I have been friends for many years. And most people don't know that the architect, John Stahl, is it?
Yes.
Built Ruggles Station.
Yes, he did.
You go through Ruggles Station every day and don't even know it was done by a Black person. What does that say about you people? And I'm taking you to task because that's my job as an educator. You need to know your own history so you can tell your children. You don't want to know your history? That's not the point. Your children do. You are the educators of your children. What do you know about your own history here in Boston? And why don't you know more? Get to it and get it done.
Dahna, did you get to read about it or did you get to see it?
I didn't get to see it physically in IRL in real life. I did see press about it. I did see media about it. And I was, like you, I was sort of flabbergasted. I'm like, oh, wow, that's new. There was a whole exhibition right on the front lawn and the facade of the Museum of Fine Arts. It just, to me, made it feel like a different place.
Yes.
That it was finally starting to recognize that it needed to be as much for me and people who look like us as for white patrons. And so I was very proud to see that. And I'm aware of the Stahl family too because of my dad. So I was just really proud to see Rob's work being shown there and the museum honoring Blackness.
Yes. Yes. You know, I interviewed Rob at the time, and I remember talking and hearing from young people, like maybe 15, 16, 17 years old, who had never stepped foot in the Museum of Fine Arts. And then they saw just going by like, wow, you know, there's graffiti art on the MFA, and that's how they went in. And, you know, a little shout out to the MFA, because I believe that they made the exhibit free on certain days so that families in the community could take their kids to go see. Yeah. So small steps. You know, as we're winding down right now, you know, Mr. Chandler, your work and your fight for justice, particularly through the art, will be remembered for decades and decades to come. What has been your proudest moment that you can say of your very distinguished career?
I had so many proud moments. It's hard to. I think the proudest moment in terms of education was when Simmons University, because by then it had become that, nominated me for a doctorate. You know, that's after 34 years, and thanks to Reggie Jackson putting my name in, I'm going to be honored with a doctorate in May. So in terms of my education, that's one of my proudest moments, because getting to recognition without the Herculean effort of my daughter would not have happened. I mean, that's just fact. And I want people to know that as a fact. You know, we have some of the best Black women in the world in our lives, and we're so lucky and fortunate to be able to be honored in that way. And I would charge people to go take a look at the people Simmons University has honored. You will be blown away who's on that list. Why wouldn't I want to be on that list? So I'm very, very proud about that. And I'm equally proud that it happened at a time when I was alive and my beautiful daughters have gotten an opportunity to see that happen. Because, for most children, you're just there and they want to know where the food is. And, do you have any money and that sort of thing. They don't really recognize what you do. They recognize how you treat them. And maybe they can get a little past that to be able to see that so they can pass this on to their children and their friends and so on, and be able to talk about possibilities, to be living proof that I am. That kind of possibility is a great honor to me. I am so thankful to my Lord Jesus Christ for that. Somebody needs to talk about their emotions.
Well, soon to be Dr. Dana Chandler and soon to be Dr. Dahna Chandler, thank you so much for being guests today. The New Light Encounters and Connections, a collection of more than 60 works of art, will be shown at the Museum of Fine Arts through August 22nd, my birthday, 2022. And I just want to say on a personal note,
wonderful,
Mr. Chandler, Dahna Chandler, it's just been such an amazing honor of mine to be able to speak with you both today. I have been a fan of your work, Mr. Chandler, for years, and it's just a thrill to be able to have sat down with you today. So I thank you. I thank you for your contribution to Black excellence. And I just pray that you will continue to have that wonderful fire under you for as long as you do.
Will.
I will, and thank you very much. You're a very important person too, no matter what people say. Just keep on keeping on, because you're doing some great things.
Thank you so much.
Amen to that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Remember, you can listen to past episodes of the PowerPLAY show wherever you subscribe to podcasts, including iTunes, iHeartRadio, and now Pandora Podcasts. You can also watch our shows on YouTube. Simply search the Hull Bay Productions Media channel and be sure to subscribe so you always know when we're live. And we air each Saturday at 5 p.m. on BroncoiRadio.com. So tune into a new episode of the PowerPLAY show each Thursday wherever you subscribe to podcasts, or on our YouTube channel at Hull Bay Productions Media channel, or simply visit thepowerplayshow.com. Until next time, I'm your host, Tonya McGrath. Continue to create and build.